and welcome to Stef Talks Trash. This is your host, Stephanie Valentic, Editorial Director of Waste 360, and today I'm talking trash with Dr. Marco Castaldi, a professor with the City College of New York, and Dan Pellowitz, the Executive Director of the Solid Waste Authority for Palm Beach County, Florida. Dr. Marco Castaldi recently came out with a new study called The Scientific Truth About Waste to Energy. Today, we'll be talking about his study results and about the benefits of waste to energy to local municipalities like Palm Beach County, Florida. Enjoy the show.
So first of all, I want to sincerely thank you for joining me today. It's great to have you to talk about the subject of waste to energy. So today we're talking about how waste is managed in the United States and the benefits of waste to energy. Waste is currently managed three ways within the U.S. There's recycling and composting, straight to landfill, and then there is waste to energy. And right now, landfill makes up the largest portion of these three at 52%. But today we're going to talk about a study that was recently completed that talks about the benefits of waste to energy. So first, I'd like to ask both Dan and Marco, if you would please introduce yourselves and talk about your experience in the waste industry.
Sure. My name is Dan Pellowitz. I'm the Executive Director of the Solid Waste Authority of Palm Beach County. I'm in my 30th year with the Solid Waste Authority. I started out actually in 1991 as a cost accountant here. And over the first half of my time here, I spent mostly doing analytical work in support of the operations and planning and future facility planning and design and implementation. And then around 2007, I was promoted into a managerial role, and I had the pleasure from that point forward of being involved from concept to through construction and completion of renewable energy facility number 2, our 3,000 ton per day mass burn waste energy plant that's currently in operation. Has been in operation since 2015.
Thank you for taking the time, Stephanie, to have us on. My name is Marco Castaldi. I am currently a professor at the City College of City University of New York in the chemical engineering department. I started my career in industry working at a company where we designed combustors and catalysts for emissions control and emissions reduction. My background is in combustion and catalysis. In 2004, I moved into academia. I was over at Columbia University's environmental engineering department, where myself and Professor Themelis kind of started an organization called Waste to Energy Research Technology Council, where we kind of brought our thermal backgrounds to try to help the industry in things like corrosion, emissions, and so on, and just understand it. And then in 2012, I moved over to City College, where I took that organization, WTERT, and then kind of broadened it out a little bit more into the Earth Engineering Center. And that's the center with some students and engineers that we did the work and the study with.
Now, there are a lot of misconceptions about waste to energy. So can we first start by talking about, what exactly is waste to energy and how it works?
Sure, I could start. Waste to energy is sort of exactly what it sounds like. You take garbage, municipal solid waste. That's the stuff that you and I throw away, and we throw away about 4 pounds per person per day, so it's quite a bit. And you move it through a very controlled combustion process where you burn it, and out of that you get the flue gases that are hot that you could extract energy from, make steam, and then make electricity. And then there's always a residual, which is what we call an ash. But in that ash or in that residual, again, that's all of the material that was not burned that, we throw away, coins in our pocket, sometimes our jewelry that we forget is in our purse or something. And then that gets extracted at the end. So waste to energy is really a sustainable waste management solution. But it extracts the energy from the material that you can, controllably combust, and then it also extracts materials for recycling.
Let's talk a little bit about this study. What was the premise of this study, and what was the process that you went through to kind of find out the benefits of waste to energy?
Well, okay, so the premise of the study, so as I mentioned in my introduction, my background is in combustion and catalysis, and in 2004, when applied that combustion background to looking at thermal conversion of wastes, it was clear that waste to energy was the most proven type of process, or the most reliable process compared to things like gasification pyrolysis. And what I've learned along the way is that being in education, there was kind of two things that I was seeing. One was a very a poor lack of understanding among the public and non-engineers, but then also sort of a resistance against thermal conversion, against waste to energy. And that resistance and that kind of, public that didn't have a very good grasp of it always relied on information that was conflicting. It wasn't peer reviewed. It was maybe newspaper articles, which makes great news, but it's not really the scientific underpinnings of how these processes work. So over the years, through the center, we always have been trying to improve our understanding, help industry, whether that be the waste energy industry, the recycling industry, or the landfill industry, better sustainably manage their waste. It became apparent that we needed an updated account and review of the worldwide literature, especially focused on waste to energy, to make sure that at least if somebody wants to further educate themselves, try to make a informed decision about which waste management process they should use, they could rely on this document, which basically assembles hundreds of studies around the world that are peer-reviewed, scientifically based on the performance of mass burn waste to energy.
Well, thank you. So we're going to first talk a little bit about the key findings of it, and then Dan will go into what that means for local communities in the United States. So Marco, if you'd like to share the slides that you had today and kind of explain to us a little bit more about what the key findings were of this study.
Okay, sure. So the key findings, there's what I would say is, first and foremost, there are numerous findings in there. To be clear, we're talking about waste combustion of as-received material. And so again, this is the stuff that you throw away. The garbage trucks collect them and they put them into a pit. And Dan can give a lot more information on the specifics of that. One of the main findings that we wanted to get across is that if you look at the sustainable waste management hierarchies by the US EPA and the European Union, they both have in there waste to energy or energy recovery as part of the sustainable waste management solution. And it just seems, again, that what we've seen is that that's always either forgotten or ignored when municipalities and public and others are thinking about how to sustainably manage their waste. So that's one of the first main findings. Another main finding was that there are decades of, reliable, safe operation. And it's really that type of operation that allows municipalities and countries and localities to divert waste from landfill. So that's the main thing, that with the amount of garbage that citizens and population generate, around the world, there's really only two solutions that can manage it at the scale, and that's waste to energy, thermal conversion, and landfilling. Of course, reuse and recycling are being done, but there are limitations to those that we can get into if you like. And really, it's that type of finding where if you look at countries here on the right-hand side or municipalities within the United States, all of them that use thermal conversion, waste to energy as part of their solution, you see here countries in the European Union, and you have the United States here as well, that the recycling rates are fairly consistent, but those countries that utilize waste to energy actually cut into landfill. And so it doesn't detract from recycling. And in addition, if you look at kind of a more granular level, down at let's say, local regions in the United States, and these are different municipalities in the different states, communities that use waste to energy generally have the same or higher recycling rates than the statewide average. And so one of the main findings was definitely the compatibility with recycling, not the let's call it competitiveness. The kind of last two main findings are the emissions. There's a lot of discussion about emissions. And really what we knew and what we looked to get more updated information on, which we did, was that in all of the categories where the emissions are regulated by the EPA and other state and local municipalities, is if you look at how the emissions amounts relative to their permitted level, they're normally about 70% or more below the permitted level. Now that's important because they're very low. NOx is a little bit of an issue that's still being worked on, but it's still about 30% below the regulated point. But I like to point out this chart on the right-hand side. Here is an average emissions, and in the dark blue, over 25 years of a facility operating. And the latest year that they had available when we did the study, 2019, again, of all of the emissions, I know it's hard to read, but it's the same emissions that you have on the left side. And this is relative to their permitted values. And what was very interesting from this data is that the 2019 value is a little bit lower than the 25-year average. What does that mean? That means even though that these facilities were well below their regulated limits, they're still working to improve them and modifying their operations to continually drive down the emissions. The last finding, if you will, was on the greenhouse gas type side. And all of this gets into human health impacts, which I'll just kind of make a statement about. But, one of the documents that are out there, and there are hundreds of documents that looked at not only theoretical studies, but actually data studies and emission studies. But one of the ones that I really like to point out here is from the California Air Resources Board. We all know in the United States, California is very forward-looking in terms of sustainable activities. And one of them is closed now, but there were 3 facilities operating in California, and the Air Resources Board there did their own analysis of how the greenhouse gas emissions are reduced from energy, using energy from municipal solid waste. So again, the assembly of the report is not so much, let's say, my findings, it's much more an assembly of the different data that's out there that's peer reviewed. It's vetted. You could go to the sources. You could find all the data that they have. And what does this all amount to, right? Why do we care about the emissions? Why do we care about the greenhouse gas? Because we care about human health impact. And all of the studies that we looked at, from blood studies to theoretical studies and so on, showed that there's really no correlation for an operating facility of a WTE, regardless of the proximity of the population, to adverse health effects. And in fact, most of the health impacts that a lot of these studies found were due to things like local traffic and traffic patterns and emissions from that type of vehicular traffic. So those are the main findings. There's a lot of others, but if you want something more specific, just ask.
So let's talk a little bit about the what this means for local municipalities. So Dan, if you'd like to talk a little bit about that, what are the benefits of waste to energy, why it's a better option than landfill, and everything involved with that.
Sure. Just as background, the Solid Waste Authority of Palm Beach County has 2 waste energy facilities, combined 5,000 tons per day of capacity. Our first facility went online in 1989, and just to speak to a point that Marco just made about improving operations and improving the efficiency of the air pollution control systems, that facility was fully refurbished in 2009. And during that refurbishment, we replaced the boilers, the air pollution control systems, and the control systems in the plant. And we put in place some enhancements to what was originally constructed. And one was to include selective non-catalytic reduction for the control of NOx in the boilers. And that was a significant enhancement that reduced NOx output. But also we replaced a technology, the electrostatic precipitators that we had installed in the plant originally, with the fabric filter bag houses, which we determined to be a more reliable device for the controlling of particulate. So over time, improvements are made in the facility, and you learn things and you put those in place. And what you build originally is not static for 20, 30, 40 years. These things do change over time. But to your point, the primary benefit of waste energy and its principal job is as a waste reduction tool. So what they do is they take the unrecycled portion of the waste stream and they dramatically reduce it by anywhere from 70 to 90% by volume, which minimizes the amount of waste going into the landfill and extends your landfill life. So as an example, if we didn't have waste energy, our existing landfill would have been full probably a decade ago. And we would already have had to site an additional landfill or taken steps to ship waste long distances by truck to a regional landfill outside of Palm Beach County. So what waste energy does in a nutshell is it allows a community like Palm Beach County to take responsibility of its waste locally rather than placing that burden on somebody else farther away. It also conserves your landfill space. Landfills are very difficult to site, and it's a process that's difficult to go through. We went through it in 2007 before we decided to accelerate the expansion of waste energy with our renewable energy facility number 2. We went through that process. We were looking for sites. Ultimately, our board decided, and the public was pretty much in consensus, and the environmental groups, that a landfill was not something that they wanted. So the board made the decision at the time to expand waste to energy. And that was a decision made because our board from 1989 on has always shared the vision of staff in that A, manage your waste at home, and B, try to minimize landfilling as much as possible. So for the authority, for us personally, we've adopted more of the European model, which is to promote waste to energy over landfilling, and that's consistent with what the EPA's hierarchy says and what the European Union has concluded. So, I mean, the real benefit really is in landfill savings, but also the metals recovery. We annually recover about 55,000 tons of ferrous and non-ferrous metals on an annual basis. Those have value. There are greenhouse gas savings, significant savings when you compare that to the supply chain impacts of providing virgin materials to produce metals for consumption. So we're really about the circular economy and putting anything back into the economy that we can. One thing we're really excited about now is we've received approval from the Department of Environmental Protection and for the DOT to use aggregate recovered from ash, from the bottom ash, in asphalt and concrete production. And that we've already built a test road with asphalt using ash aggregate in that mix. And that was all studied by the University of Florida, Dr. Tim Townsend and his folks at the University of Florida. They worked with the DOT testing lab and the Department of Environmental Protection to put that in place. So we're really excited about that because right now, more than half of the waste that we landfill is actually ash from the 2 waste energy plants. And we have the ability to potentially divert 200,000 tons of ash into commerce, into road building and construction, which will really help further reduce our landfill consumption. And I think it's a real benefit going forward that once we've got this established and other plants have the ability to do this, that the landfill minimization is going to be that much greater. But, you know, there are a lot of other benefits as well. I mean, one of the other benefits is you eliminate a lot of landfill odor. You're eliminating the generation of methanogenic and non-methanogenic gases from the landfill. It makes us a better neighbor to everyone around us. Our closest neighbor is a country club. Their houses ranging from 500,000 up to the millions. And we've been side by side with them since 1989 when we first became operational on this site. So it makes us a better neighbor. The other thing it does is, as I talked about, is the long distance transportation of waste. There are traffic impacts, there are fuel consumption impacts and greenhouse gas impacts associated with transporting solid waste in trucks over long distances. And we are able to avoid that by managing our waste locally. And then the other aspect is we use our waste energy facility as an educational tool. We have been invested in the classrooms, in the schools for the better part of 30 years as an enhancement to the environmental education programs in those schools. Outside of COVID times, we have 20,000 plus students a year come through on tours through our facilities. They come to our LEED Platinum Education Center. They interact with our interactive table where they sort recyclables and household chemical waste into the right bins. Then they go across our sky bridge, walk into the facility, go up to the control room level. They can see the cranes operating. They see what a county's waste generation is. When you look at that pit, it has a really big impression on anyone who looks at it, and they realize how much waste we actually generate as a society. And beyond that, it also demonstrates how these facilities like ours can live and cooperate with nature. We've got a large conservation area that sits right next to our waste energy plant. We've got walking trails in there. We've got one of the largest wading bird populations in South Florida in that area. And I think it really does demonstrate how waste to energy and how modern solid waste management systems can function and cooperate with nature.
So now we've talked about the study, we've talked about the benefits of waste to energy. Marco, do you believe that there needs to be any change within the United States to improve the waste to energy infrastructure? And where do you see the future of waste to energy within the United States?
Okay, I'll start with the easy one. Do I think the United States needs to change? The short answer is yes. As Dan mentioned, they adopted the European model. The European model, they have waste energy facilities all over the place in downtown areas, in the areas of urban dense population where most of the waste is generated. In the United States, of course, we're blessed with a whole bunch of land, but that doesn't mean that land should be used to just bury the garbage. And so I think, the mindset needs to change. That's key. Dan touched upon the education center that they have there. I unfortunately haven't gotten to see it. I'll take a ride one day. But all of the work that we've done, whenever we present really just in an abstract, just in an objective way, what waste energy is, and we're presenting it to people who are uninitiated, young students, people who are just willing to learn, they all ask, why aren't we doing more of this? And that's a question that I can't answer quite well. As I mentioned at the beginning, there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of resistance out there, which I don't understand. And that's the major change, the mindset and the understanding that this is part of the solution. It's not the solution. Recycling, reduction, reuse has to happen. But this is definitely part of the solution. To your other question, what's the future of waste energy? I don't know. And, this is a difficult question. What I have seen over my kind of 15 years of doing this research is there has been a growing understanding of it. There's been a growing awareness of it. And I think there's been a growing acceptance of it. But what the future is, I don't know. If you would have asked me 5 years ago, I would have said we're ready to go and build more. Especially with when Palm Beach County came online, that's like a showcase facility, but not much has happened, and I don't know why.
Well, thank you so much. Just one final thought here. As we've, been reiterating, there have been misconceptions with waste to energy. What is one thing you can say to the audience for somebody who was kind of on the fence about it or a skeptic about waste to energy? Dan, if you'd like to start, what is one thing that you would say that has really overcome the misconceptions of waste to energy?
Well, I would certainly mention the fact that the environmental quality from these new modern waste energy plants is they're miles ahead of what it was back in the 70s. And a lot of the folks that get up and criticize, they'll stand up at the microphone and they pull out a yellow piece of newspaper clipping from 30 years ago and they talk about one failure in one place somewhere. The reality is that we're Palm Beach County. We've been doing it for 30 years. The public in Palm Beach County embraces waste to energy. You go to other places, and I don't understand it either, as Marco said, because it's one of those things where once people see it and they see how it works, they would never do anything different. And I think that's really what's important. The difficulty is, and what we paid a lot of attention to is going into the process was to make sure that we provided proper education and outreach to the public, explained over and over again what we were doing and why we were doing it, and including asking questions about the technology and about emissions. We looked at alternative technologies to waste energy and evaluated those. And in the end, we had very little opposition to this facility. And maybe that's because we had experience with it since 1989 and people trust us with it. But from my perspective, I don't believe that the overwhelming majority of people would support wholesale landfilling. And certainly if we decided tomorrow to shut down our waste energy plant, I think we'd get an outcry bigger than what anybody would imagine, similar to what you'd get if we decided to shut down recycling. So it's really a question of making folks comfortable with it and understanding it. And that's why we've always been open to bring people down here in support of the industry to come down, see what we do, see how it's done, see how we do it, so that they too can become comfortable with it. And to me, I think that's the biggest factor. Do the outreach, talk to people, explain it to them, answer the questions. And when you do that, I think in the end, you're going to have a much better chance of success.
Marco, do you have any final thoughts?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, what Dan said is I 100% agree with. I mean, what I could say is people should read for themselves, get the information for themselves. They should ask questions, whatever questions they have. How does the technology work? What about the emissions? You could go online and look at the emissions from some of these facilities, and you could then ask, are these good or bad? And you'll get answers. And there are people like myself, Dan mentioned Dr. Timothy Townsend, and others that people could reach out to and be happy to give information. So definitely inform yourself, ask questions. And as Dan said, you have to visit the facilities, because once you do, you will question, why would you do anything else with the material that cannot be recycled prior to going to a landfill?
Thank you once again for joining me for this episode of Stef Talks Trash. For this and other episodes, please visit waste360.com. Have a great day.